She sent out by herself with no spending money, with a cell phone camera, and the hope of getting close to the court case to cover Julian's trial. 2 years later, she's interviewed almost anyone there is involved in this case to interview. She does wonderful reports every single week and has been able to educate almost the entire continent of Europe, or those willing to listen, about Julian's case. So without further ado, everybody, Taylor Hudak.
All right, Andrew, I want to thank you for that introduction, and I also want to thank the Shiptons for being here. John Shipton, it is good to see you again, and Gabriel, thank you for also being here, and a big thank you to Action for Assange for hosting this event. Excellent work they're doing. Live streams every single week for hours covering this case and speaking about the importance of this case. It's also something that obviously is very important to me, and I spent quite a bit of time covering it. And I want to begin, first of all, by reiterating a point that WikiLeaks editor-in-chief Christian Rafferson mentioned. This was on the day before the first part of the extradition hearings, and he said that whatever one's passion is or cause is, the outcome of this case will impact your ability to fight for what means so much to you, whether that be privacy rights, anti-surveillance, censorship, animal rights, gay rights, whatever your cause is. Julian Assange's situation, his fate, is inherently tied to your fate as well. And if you're not an activist, if you're not a journalist, if you're just a member of the public who is concerned about how the United States engages with the rest of the world, and you're curious about politics, this case impacts your right to know. An attack on Julian Assange is an attack on all of us. Now, covering this case in London extensively, it is no secret that there has been numerous challenges to covering the case, whether NGO observers whose professional job it is to monitor these court proceedings and were unable to the journalists like myself who had some difficulty connecting to the video conference link. This is the most consequential press freedom case of our time. It is in the public interest to learn about these proceedings and hear about what's happening in this courtroom. We also must ask ourselves why this is happening. Why are we keeping this case in the dark? Why has the media largely remained silent? Fortunately, because of groups like Action for Assange and other grassroots journalists, more and more people in the mainstream media, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, among other publications, are stepping up and they're speaking out and saying enough is enough, this is wrong, this is an attack on all journalists. So it's not just a fringe group of activists anymore. That is not at all the case. Every single major civil liberties organization in the United States and throughout the world is calling for Julian Assange to be freed and for this case to be dropped. The journalism that won Julian Assange numerous awards is the same journalism that has him in a prison today. He is in one of the worst prisons, if not the worst prison in England right now. And I want to reiterate right now, especially to the Biden administration, that each day that Julian Assange is sitting in Belmarsh prison, and each day that the United States, this country, continues to prosecute this case, is another day that the United States betrays its own Constitution. How can we allow this? Does this make any sense? No, it doesn't, right? And lastly, at the end of the second half of the extradition proceedings, I spoke with Lori Love, who is one of the very few people who can understand what Julian Assange is going through as far as facing extradition to the United States. And Lori Love said something to me that was very profound. He said that oftentimes it is the process can be the punishment. This process is a punishment, and we're seeing that happen right now, especially with the judge's latest decision back earlier in winter where she denied his bail. Absolutely devastating decision, but one thing that we all have to remember is that, I want to end off first of all with a message from Edward Snowden. I said this a few months ago, but I think it's really important to keep remembering this. And I think all of us here who are activists and journalists, especially independent journalists, know this, but we cannot rely on elected leaders to solve our problems. And while I am going to call upon the Biden administration to separate itself from Trump-era attacks on the free press by dropping this case and freeing Assange, we must all depend on each other as well, because real change begins with me, it begins with all of you here, it begins with the organizers of this event, it begins with everyone who is fighting for this case and who cares about the future of the free press. Another thing too here is that this is not just a broader press issue or First Amendment issue. This is someone's life, and I think that's why it's important to have these events, to have Julian Assange's family here, so we know this is a real person who's being impacted by this. Niels Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, said that he has been subjected to torture for a decade. This is completely unacceptable, and the UK government, the US, Ecuador, and Sweden have not been held accountable for this. Julian Assange ought to be freed, and he also ought to be compensated for the horrific state crimes that have been leveled against him. If we constantly raise awareness and collectively act together like we are today, we can impact Julian Assange's tomorrow. We can save free speech and free press around the world, and we can save the life of Julian Assange. Thank you.
So there's 4 very special individuals in the back. They're with the Mid-Ohio Workers Association. And just so everyone knows, they are people that do tireless work, truly tireless, like make me feel like I don't do enough in the world. They are the people that go around and literally knock on doors to make sure the members of this community have access to utilities, can pay their rent, and can eat. So I would just like to encourage everyone to, as we wrap up, as everything kind of comes to an end, take a moment to talk with them. If you're a local or just someone nearby from the state or states surrounding, please feel free to talk with them about ways you can help. Because while we still struggle for Julian's freedom, there are people that still struggle to eat. And that's something that I think is super important to recognize. So I want to give them a thank you for turning out with us, and anyone that has even just the ability to shake a hand, I think should really go over and tell them and thank you for all the work that they do. But we've had a lot of really hard, really deep, really scary conversations up to this point. So I want to tell a story about Julian's court trial that hopefully will make everybody laugh a little bit. It was September of 2020, the first Thursday of the second round of his trials. I think they were counting it as day 4 of the second round. And the prosecutors didn't show up. It was a quite contemporaneous situation, and I hope I used that word right. You had Claire Dobbins, who was the junior prosecutor, like the little league pitcher of UK criminal prosecutions, standing up on the bench. And then you had another gentleman who, I wish I could remember his name. All I remember is that he goes by Mega Brain on his own website. Defines himself as Mega Brain. And if anyone remembers his name, please feel free to shout it out so I can tell the story a little bit better. But that individual was late for work. You are a U.S. prosecutor in literally the most dangerous court case, setting the most dangerous legal precedent, fighting one of the most solid laws of our country, of the UK and internationally, right? Edward Fitzgerald, I think his name was, if I remember that right. And Mr. Fitzgerald called in late and said, I left my laptop and my papers at court and I wanted to work from home. And then another couple minutes later, you find out that he woke up in the wrong house. The head prosecutor for the United States, working on behalf of the United Kingdom to take all of our rights away, fell asleep in the wrong bed. And I don't know about you guys, but the only time I've woken up not knowing where I was is if I had a little too much fun the night before. So he calls in and he says, my laptop charger's there, all of my legal papers are sitting on my desk, but I had planned on doing everything from home today. Obvious lie, right? They're frantic, his laptop dies and he's unable to connect to court. He calls in on another phone and says, hey, I'm still having trouble, I might be able to do it from this phone, but I don't know if I'll be able to. Like, I'm gonna try, but this phone only has like 5% battery. I don't know if I can make it through the whole court proceeding. right? So that hangs up. And then, I can't remember his name either. We joked about it, calling him Johnny Bush League. The third string prosecutor for the United States was with Mr. Fitzgerald over in the wrong apartment. Do I have that? Lewis. Yes, Fitzgerald was the QC defending Julian. I apologize. Prosecutor Lewis woke up, mega brain, woke up in the wrong house, right? So after forgetting his laptop, forgetting his charger, not having his phone charged at all, leaving all of his privileged legal papers sitting on his desk in the courtroom, visible from the camera that the reporters were watching through, right? And in a frantic frenzy, court kind of gets delayed 15, 20 minutes, and we're all kind of just waiting. And then this second string hitter, Claire Dobbins, says, we have a problem. My husband, he's not feeling good. And I don't know about you, but if you're running late for work, the easiest thing to do is call off, because most jobs are better with a call off than showing up late, right? So Claire Dobbins, in her infinite wisdom, says, well, my husband's sick. He may or may not have symptoms that could or couldn't be coronavirus. And then court gets suspended. 3 weeks is when this all wraps up. The last week of the prosecution, or last week of the witness hearing, the U.S. said endlessly, the defense is taking too long. The defense is taking too long. The prosecution didn't even show up one day. We had witnesses, Noam Chomsky, Daniel Ellsberg. We had Andy Worthington. We had Khalid El-Masri, a gentleman tortured by the U.S. government as witnesses in this case. The prosecution brought 2 or 3 witnesses to the bench. They got laughed out of court. QC Lewis, the head prosecutor of the United States, got laughed out of court while questioning his own witness. Why? Because this man was such a bulldog that the person he had as a witness in another trial that was